No. Yes?
After watching The Five Doctors, did you have any regrets about not being in it?
Why are you so convinced I watched The Five Doctors?
The Five Doctors, as we all know, is a 20th anniversary special of Doctor Who, broadcast in 1983. Unfortunately, with it being the 60th anniversary this year, 2023, it means that here we are, 40th anniversary of the 20th anniversary of the Five Doctors. Who would have thought that that's a thing? So I remember at a convention called Players Con back in 1991. Peter Davison was a guest, and he got up on stage. The first panel he did at the convention, he's like, can you believe, once again, 1991, can you believe this is the 10th anniversary of me becoming the Doctor? And that seemed very long. Here we are now. We are well over 40 years, 42 years of Davison since he had been the Doctor, the 40th anniversary of the Five Doctors. Now, I myself started watching Doctor Who in August of 1984. And that first story I had watched, and remember, as we talked many times, being shown at KTCA, that first story was called The Visitation. I had seen Doctor Who before, but I'd seen bits and pieces. Mainly, I recall maybe seeing something from Revenge of the Cybermen, because the Nerva beacon seems very familiar to me. It just went through like channel surfing or something. But when it comes to The Visitation, and we'll talk about this in depth some point, I fell in love. I loved the story, and I had decided to keep watching it. And so I knew that this Peter Davison person was the Doctor. He seemed rather new in the role to me, and I assumed the only other one was the guy who eventually I found out to be Tom Baker. You know, everyone says the guy with the scarf, right? We all say stuff like that. No idea whatsoever that there were actually 3 other people to play the Doctor. And so when I had come across my schedule on KTCA, months later, it was the Five Doctors. And that would make sense because there's probably a pledge drive or something. Five Doctors wasn't really run as part of our scheduled program. It always seemed to have been saved for PBS, pledge breaks and pledge marathons. We've talked about that before as well. So when it came to the Five Doctors, I was like, I had no idea what to expect. And I had no idea that other people had played it. I had no idea that the series had been around at that point, for me actually to watch 21 years, but being the 20th anniversary of the show, I had no idea about any of this, obviously. So it was very new. As a matter of fact, once I found out that there were 5 people total to play the Doctor, I really thought that was pretty excessive, to be honest. Like, does it really need to be that many? Clearly, didn't really understand how it all worked, but that was kind of the fun about being a fan of Doctor Who back then, was kind of the idea that you kind of retrofitted yourself into the history, and you didn't necessarily know what was the history, especially when you're starting out, and there's no such thing as DWM, no such thing as the internet, where I know a lot of people can go and just look it all up and figure it out and know what to look for and stuff. It was totally blind, obviously, to us, and that was really exciting, that very first moment of the Five Doctors with William Hartnell and giving that speech was what really made me fall in love with that story, because within that, 30-40 second bit, that showed me that there was actually a lot of history to Doctor Who, because it looked like, even though it was very clear it was the TARDIS and it was the control room, you still have Randall's, that a lot had changed. And it was very fascinating to me. Perhaps not surprisingly, with the Five Doctors being quite the story it was, being very special, that there had been 3 VHS releases of it. But also, there's a lot more to that. There was 3 VHS releases, PAL VHS releases. There's one beta release at the same time as the original release of the Five Doctors. There were 2 DVD releases in the UK, I suppose as well over here as well, and one Blu-ray release as well, as we'll just talk about here in a second. Oh, but don't forget, there was also a Laserdisc release as well. So, and we'll talk about all those today. I mean, there was clearly a lot. I have a feeling I might be even missing a format that it was released on. I'm not quite sure. And even within the DVD releases, we say 2 DVD releases because of each one being distinctively different that we'll talk about. But I even think that there was just some like freebie giveaway versions that were like in newspapers or something as well. Now, of course, one of the greatest controversies going back to when the Five Doctors originally aired is very simply the fact that on November 23rd, 1983, the 20th anniversary, the actual anniversary of the start of Doctor Who, the UK did not run the Five Doctors. It was ran in the US. It was a Wednesday. It ran in the US on PBS stations. We were the first to get it. And I know that that's something that a lot of people are not happy about. But then it aired on November 25th in the UK as part of the Children in Need special evening broadcast that I'm sure not too many people were really thrilled about. And it's really interesting because I think a number of fans or a number of PBS stations actually ran Doctor Who, the Five Doctors, on November 23rd. I know a lot of people always see that it was like Chicago running it, but a lot of PBS stations ran it, including KTCA. I didn't see it because I was very much not a fan at that point. I hadn't been watching, and I don't remember if that was via satellite link. It might have been, because I think at one point they were hoping to get all the stations in the U.S. to run Doctor Who through satellite feed, opposed to cycling tapes, which is what they'd been doing. But I think a lot of the logistics or something didn't really make that viable. But I do want to say that the Five Doctors was a satellite link. Now in the UK, of course, you had the Children in Need, you had Terry Wogan there, and you also had Peter Davison there. And he gave away his coat. But what I think is really interesting about that is that he's wearing the proper costume. Because don't forget, after Warriors of the Deep, his costume changes, because in theory he leaves his costume, his regular clothes behind at the sea base, and from the Awakening on to the end of his era, he wears a modified version of his original cricketer costume. But here he's wearing the proper costume, and he gives off his coat to give away. Now, if you think about it, and looking up the dates and stuff, I found that He would have had, at that point in November, just a couple weeks prior, he would have finished Planet of Fire, and then to come back a while later and do Caves of Androzani. So that's where we are with season 21, when Davison comes and sees Wogan. But to kind of make matters worse, like I said, it was pre-recorded because Davison was on his way to a convention in Chicago. And I think it's really interesting how us Americans, and I mean, I think we still do now, had really treated stars from Doctor Who and other places like they kept coming back to the US because they were treated like royalty, and they were paid very, very, very well. I know of people who ran conventions who mortgaged their house, lost all their belongings because they kept funneling money into conventions that did actually not come out as money winners. I mean, I don't know for certain, but I think the Chicago Visions, was one of those situations that was not exactly a money maker for the people who put it on. I'm not saying they lost their house or anything. I do know people who had put on conventions that lost their houses, but there's some sort of like real weird sort of addiction, I think, for people to put on conventions. And I just, for one, I mean, it's nice to meet these people, but it's like a kind of their personal playground to have these guests come in, like the Chicago Visions conventions. I'm not talking about Chicago TARDIS, which is currently running. I'm talking about its predecessor from the 1990 to 1990. 1998, something like that. That was different. And it just seemed like there was no limit to how many guests would show up at this thing. And not like smaller guests. They were all big guests from Doctor Who, The Avengers, Red Dwarf, Blake Seven, Robin of Sherwood. You name it. And it'd be like not one from each series, but multiple. Like it just seemed like that. This is just how these go. So it was a bit ridiculous. And I also know that people in the UK, fans in the UK, probably weren't too thrilled because, first of all, it makes it, because I don't think that folks in the UK putting on conventions weren't offering the money that these big conventions were putting out there in the U.S. And they didn't, it just seemed really like a lot of these stars may not do the UK conventions because they rather get paid and pampered at the U.S. conventions. And if I'm not mistaken, I think Patrick Troughton was one of them. I think he only made like one UK appearance, didn't he? If that. And then he'd be over here, and we had tours like the Doctor Who Fan Club of America did these great big like Doctor Who conventions in its heyday, bringing these guests all around the country. So that makes it very difficult for anyone to compete with that. So, and I think the convention in Chicago was called Spirit of Light, if I'm not mistaken.
November 26 and 27 in Chicago, fantasy becomes reality. Doctor Who, the ultimate celebration, featuring live all four Doctors, Tom Baker, Peter Davison, Patrick Troughton, and myself, John Pertwee. Join us and 17 other stars in celebration of our 20th anniversary.
For tickets, call free 1-800-543-8800 or send money order $50 adult, $20 children 5 through 11 to Spirit of Light, 4805 West Irving Park, Chicago 60641.
Well, and also, November 23rd and November 25th, PBS, they didn't include all the scenes to the Five Doctors. On the 25th, they got more scenes. We'll talk about that in a second. But on the BBC One, the Five Doctors was presented as a 190-minute special, basically same thing we got here in the U.S. and continue to get here. But then in 1984, BBC One reran the Five Doctors as 4 25-minute episodes. And once again, I'll talk about that in a second too, about how that impacts a lot of things. And it's still it's still being run around here as well. And The Five Doctors was a co-production with ABC of Australia, the Australian Broadcasting Company, because they put money in. I don't know how much. I really don't know the details. I think it's in one of the documentaries that is out there, but I just don't remember. It's funny because you can't really tell. And I don't mean that from a budget standpoint or anything. I mean it more of basically by the, there isn't anything really in the credits. I think maybe one thing, or was that added in a special edition about being a co-production. I think what we got out of it, though, right, was the new TARDIS console room, which to this day is still my favorite. Now, today we're talking about the Five Doctors, and we got many versions of the Five Doctors to talk about. We have many things to talk about with the Five Doctors. It's very iconic. And as I'm in the 60th anniversary for Doctor Who, I do feel like that there is much to talk about when it comes to this. So hold on, there's a lot to talk about. There's some things that I find personally of interest that I need to talk about with this. The first one, all these years later, me being on video, may I apologize to all of my friends that I had in grade school. Everybody who I know in grade school. This video is to apologize to you for making you watch The Five Doctors, as I firmly believed that once you watched The Five Doctors, that you would fall in love with Doctor Who forever. You would see it the way that I saw it. You would find the error of your ways for not liking it. You would probably apologize to me for not liking it sooner, because to me, this was where it was at. This was where, you may not have liked the other ones for whatever reason because you are wrong, but the Five Doctors would pull you in. It didn't. I don't think there's anything there to tell anyone that it did. But honestly, it repelled more people than my friends. I mean, no one wanted to come to my house anymore because every time to come over, like, we could watch The Five Doctors. No! Revenge of the Cybermen was another one. I mean, I know there's people like you that are like me out there, and you've done the same thing. And I don't know. It's the same people that put on conventions, the same people who collect every VHS of the series. There's something in us that's maybe just a little off, and I really thought that my friends would love it, and they didn't. They tolerated me, and that was very kind. So, and this was a story too. The Five Doctors was a story that I had watched. As soon as I watched it the first time, I fell in love with it. For me, going from, why is there so many doctors, to being like, I love every aspect of this. To this day, I love every aspect of the Five Doctors. When I read the modern reviews on it, the fact that people don't think it's that great, it actually hurts me. I don't understand. I do understand, but I don't understand. But seeing what Terrence Dicks had to go through to create this story, and having to recreate it, and who, like, Robert Holmes didn't want to write it. I think it's a fantastic tale. And I wish, I guess maybe that's part of it, but I loved it from the first time I ever put my hands on it. And I just have great memories of, we had taped it, before the VHSs, when it was on Channel 2, KTCA, we recorded it. I watched that recording every single week. I was a part of a bowling team, and a junior bowling team at Apache Plaza. And we would get done around 11:30 or noon. I'd go home. And for those of you in the U.S. will know what I'm talking about. Every Saturday, I would have Totino's Pizza, these lovely 99-cent pizzas. And I mean, I'm 11. So it's not like I'm like a 30-year-old doing this. But I'm having my pizza and I'm rewatching The Five Doctors. It was bliss. Truly wonderful. Great memories. I absolutely loved it. I also did it with another one was the Horns of Nyman. For some reason, was another one that I'd watch over and over again weekly as well, doing the bowling thing. And we'll talk about that if we ever get to Horns of Nyman. I'm an odd one for sure. Since I watched it first, I didn't know who anyone was. Right, I didn't know who Patrick Troughton was. I didn't know who John Pertwee was. There's something about Pertwee actually in this story that actually makes me distrust him. If you ever watch like him driving with Sarah Jane Smith, and they're just chatting along, and he stops Bessie, and she's just like, "Why did we stop for?" For some reason, even today, I actually feel like that's like it's kind of creepy and weird because he just stops and he just stares at her for a second, and not knowing anything about the series, it's like, is he not really a doctor? I don't know. I just thought some of those performances, without knowing what they're doing, what their motivation was, who they were, I thought those were just a little off for me. It's really interesting, isn't it? But even now, I kind of feel the same way about that. But the thing that I find very funny is I said to myself, saw that opening with William Hartnell, and that is from Flashpoint, Dalek Invasion of Earth. I didn't know that then. I had no idea where it came from. It seemed utterly perfect for the Five Doctors. It seemed utterly perfect for the setting the tone for the anniversary. So Richard Herndl is playing the role of the original Doctor, and I thought he was William Hartnell. Okay, I thought he was William Hartnell. I had nothing to go off of. He looked enough like it, but my mind was always like trying to add up his age, trying to think, could that really been him? Not knowing that when Hartnell took the role, he was in his mid-50s. Theoretically, if he had survived, not been an ill man, he could have still returned for the role, theoretically. But I had no idea. And I'd look at the end credits, and I would see, and those things move pretty quickly, and trying to stop something in a VCR wasn't always easy. So I knew his name was Hartnell, and you'd see quickly, and I don't know if I saw that Hartnell's name was in the credits, maybe the last one there, or just seeing Herndl, and that was close enough. It went by so fast. I think I saw it. I thought for sure it was William Hartnell. It was a little while, maybe a year or so, when I started to get more of like DWM and stuff. I started to know the score. I think it probably was once again Jean-Marc Lefissier's Program Guide, Volume 1, that was able to kind of set me on the right course for that. And that was, once again, folks, that is kind of the fun stuff about the Five Doctors. And Doctor Who in general, you don't know the background right away. There's so much to it that you have to kind of figure it out. I wonder how it is for people these days who are starting out. Do they look it all up? Do they only go back to like Rose, or do they only go back to Tennant? I mean, it's so interesting. There is so much, right? There's been so much that's been made. Another thing, being a young man, a young boy in my 11, I would still play with toys. And I don't play with toys at all anymore because I'm a grown man, of course. But back then, I loved to recreate stuff. Big Star Wars fan, Star Wars action figures, all that. So I started playing Doctor Who with my Star Wars action figures. So Luke Skywalker, Bespin Luke Skywalker, was the Doctor, and I think Princess Leia was Tegan, and I think one of my G.I. Joes might have been Duke, was Turlo. And then, like, for the Cybermen, I'd make masks for them and stuff. And I remember not understanding the British accent that well. I thought TARDIS for a long time was Targus, Targus, and because, stuff was an NTSC, never twice the same color, or never the same color, I guess NTSC stands for. I thought the TARDIS was brown. So I got this little like watch case that was, that you get at Target that was plastic see-through, like transparent, and the watch was in there. Someone got a watch. I took that and I put paper all around it, said police on it. It was brown. That was my Targus. And remember playing the Five Doctors. It was a fall afternoon, and I had them all different parts of my yard, a lot of leaves and stuff. It was a cloudy day. It seemed like the death zone, and that was really cool. I still remember that. It was a lot of fun. And later on, I'd made my own TARDIS console and stuff, and I played, played with figures for a while. I enjoyed it. I loved it. I loved recreating. I mean, once again, never thought that you could have them all recorded anyway. So it was my way to kind of recreate and stuff. So it was a lot of fun. Now, of course, being an adult, I don't do such things anymore. Like, I don't collect all the character options. Okay, I collect actually most of the character options. I don't play with them. I actually really don't play with them, really. But, there's stuff lacking on the character option side of things, such as like TARDIS consoles, right? Do you think that's a no-brainer that they would be putting out TARDIS consoles? So I have to get my smack from somewhere else. And so I had actually ended up asking someone to create some consoles for me. They're doing it anyway, and that was the greatest thing. 3D printing is pretty amazing. And so someone made me a character option size TARDIS, like from season from Five Doctors till the end of the series. This is my little TARDIS console, and you might want to you're more than welcome to think this is the only one I've had made, but you will find soon enough that you would be horribly wrong. But the thing is that I absolutely love this, and this actually lights up, but I don't know how to do that. I think it actually got a little broken in transition. A gentleman by the name of Richard Wood, I believe, made this for me. He made all my consoles, and this is truly, truly beautiful. And no, I don't put my character option figures by it.
Well, so two of them made it. I wonder what happened to the other.
And while we're showing off, before we actually get into the meat of the matter, that possibly I have more than a couple Cybermen helmets, because we have shown off to you so far, if I'm not mistaken, the Wheel in Space Cyberman helmet, as well as Silver Nemesis. But perhaps I also have a Five Doctors helmet as well. Now, you could also say, if for push comes to shove, that this is also a Earthshock one, but it really isn't, is it? Because this is not transparent as it is in Earthshock. But aren't these beautiful? Gosh, I just love these. I can't explain what it is that makes me happy with these, apart from just seeing them on the shelf. And you might think I only have 3 Cybermen helmets, but you would be wrong about that as well. Now, sometimes I like to talk about if there's anything specific that is in the Radio Times that is of importance that you might like. I have very few actual editions of the Radio Times, apart from this. And this is really nice. This is actually might be only the second time I've taken it out of its plastic case. But I mean, it's really cool to have a little piece of history like this. This is actually from Scotland, though. If I'm not, yeah, it's from Scotland, and this is really cool. Now, this adorns the cover by Andrew Skilder, and you'll be like, well, this is also the same color or cover, excuse me, that is used on the very first VHS release. Yes and no. We'll talk about that in a second as well. We'll put that back. I just love that piece as well. So we have that, and that's pretty neat. Now, as far as getting to the Five Doctors itself, and we have multiple Five Doctors to get to, when you think about it, we probably, if you put all the Doctors together from all the versions, we have about 25 Doctors to get through, so to speak. Talking about this, though, the original from 1985, this release is the second Doctor Who release. And as you'll see, I went to look onto Doctor Who magazine because I like to pull that information. And I find that unless I'm missing it, there wasn't a whole lot of talk about the original release of the Five Doctors. There was like I couldn't find anything about the original release. It might have been mentioned somewhere in passing, but like in the news section, I didn't see it. Now, of course, making this video, and the moment I release it, probably 5 of you are going to send me where it was, and it's probably full page ads and huge articles about it. But honestly, and I have all the DWMs, I couldn't find it. So if you do know of something where it talks about specifically the release of the original Five Doctors as well as the release of the Betamax tape, I'd love to know, because I feel like that would have been covered a little bit more. So let's jump ahead to the 1990s, or to 1990, if you will. And we have this. This is the second Five Doctors release. And for this one, with a cover by Alistair Pearson, we go to DWM, and we go to DWM 160. And it's mentioned in here, but it talks about the string of black and white VHS releases that were also done at the same time. 1990 is one of those points in Doctor Who VHS history that is extraordinarily interesting, isn't it? Because not only you get this, and there's a reason why this got released, we'll talk about in a second. The reason why this is interesting is because we also had like the start of the 1960s black and white releases coming out, and the change in direction of what the covers looked like makes it a fantastic change for the Doctor Who VHS release, VHS range. So in DWM 160, that's what we talk about. In DWM 162, there's another update on the VHS release, including a picture of Alistair Pearson himself with the Five Doctors cover, which is a great cover, and we'll go through the covers as well in a second. I think for something that's been around for so long, it has to be a challenge for people to keep taking new directions with the Five Doctors. Going over to DWB is a little bit better for DWB as far as going back to the original release. So DWB talks about the forthcoming original VHS of the Five Doctors, and talks about Andrew Skillet's recovery, yet shows the VHS cover for the Seeds of Death. So, which I think is interesting, because so it's probably a Sid Sutton cover, but you have that beautiful, and it's, I think we could easily say, iconic cover for the Five Doctors, and they don't show it. But DWB also had something to report that was very sad. DWB 26 reported the death of Kevin Stoney. This would have been in 1985. So rest in peace, Kevin Stoney. Wait a minute. Kevin Stoney did not die in 1985. He died in 2008. He lived a full life. He died at the age of 87. And he actually died on my birthday, as it happens, in 2008, January 22nd. It was just one of those things that wasn't his death reported a couple of times, actually. But Kevin Stoney led a full life. So that was just one of those fan things back in the 80s. Kevin Stoney did not die in 1985. So in DWB 65, we jump now from 85 to 90. DWB 65 had an interview with Alistair Pearson, and includes a rough look at the 1990 cover for the Five Doctors, and it's very exciting. I mean, I know people get excited to see what the new collections art looks like. Honestly, though, and even like, in my opinion, even for the DVD covers that once again per story, waiting to see what the covers of the new VHSs looked like was so much fun, and to see rough versions of it, or to see the creative endeavors. I mean, from 1990 to 1996, early 1997, these were cool. They were painted. They were just really a wonderful, wonderful pieces of art. Don't get me wrong. What Lee Binding does, and I think I need to backtrack here a little bit. What Clayton Hickman does, what Lee Binding does with the collections, they are also works of art. They're digital works of art. They are beautiful, especially going through the booklet for the collection sets. They are wonderful. No ill intent about that. There was just something about these, though, that I find beautiful. And some don't hit the mark. This does, others do. Just a wonderful period of time that is gone now. But we're in a different age, and that's okay. So you had that. DWB loved Alistair Pearson. I mean, who doesn't? But in DWB 79, you have a little piece called Illustrations. Someone is earning their money over at DWB. And it was a talk with Alistair Pearson about his work. There we got to see works of what Ghostlight, I think that must have been the book cover, because it wasn't the VHS cover. I believe that was Andrew Skilleter, if I'm not mistaken. And then they showed off Brain of Morbius, and of course the Five Doctors. Brain of Morbius, of course, being the broadcast version. Then you jump forward to DWB 80. And in DWB 80, they have that article called Memory Cheats, and they look at the Five Doctors. And it's written by a young guy by the name of Tim Monroe, and it says right next to it, age 16. Immediately have a bias. Well, that would be wrong, because Tim actually has a very unbiased look at the Five Doctors. He knows Doctor Who very well. It's a very well written article. The only thing I would say about that, though, is that he tends to apologize for liking it, which I think, unfortunately, whether I find that okay or not okay, the problem with that is I think that's the way a lot of fans felt in the 80s, 90s. Maybe even early 2000s, before the series came back. We didn't really know how people would accept us liking Doctor Who. Sounds crazy, but it was a very different time back then to be a fan, for sure. And also, the back cover for that issue of DWB 80 was the full artwork, clean artwork for Alistair Pearson's Five Doctors, which, of course, looks beautiful. So you got that going for it. Now let's jump forward a little bit, and we'll get to these separately. But jumping up to 1995, we go back to DWM, and we go back to issue 227, where we get the first blurb in there that there's about the 1995 release of The King's Demons, that also includes the Five Doctors. And I don't think, I didn't see, and I remember, it says it may include additional footage. They didn't know yet. They didn't know what was to come for the Five Doctors 1995 release. So that's actually really interesting at that point. Seemed for DWM, which is, very linked to Doctor Who, that they didn't know for certain. And then it wasn't until DWM 230 that we finally get mention in the magazine that there's going to be additional footage for the Five Doctors. And in 231, DWM 231 has a 3-page article with Paul Vadesis talking and explaining the thought process for the new edit. So, looking at it, we've actually come a long way for DWM in 11 years for not saying anything about the original VHS release to actually having multiple pages about the new edit, which, I mean, obviously makes sense, doesn't it? So let's go through, and of course, DWM 232 has a review for its release on shelf life. So, you know, it got some exposure here. So let's go through these releases, okay? Let's talk about the original release, which is BBC V 2020. It has the iconic, for the cover, it has the iconic Radio Times cover for this that was painted by Andrew Skilder. But is it, though? If you look closely at both this original cover and the Radio Times cover here, if you look at it, and this, I'm not expecting you to look at this, we'll put up a graphic on the screen. Can't you tell the difference? If you look at them, the Radio Times cover is not as detailed. There's just more detail on the VHS. And I want to say that has to do with, I don't remember if Andrew Skilter was a little rushed at the end for the Radio Times cover, provided it's still beautiful. It's still beautiful. Do not get me wrong on that. But then was able to go back and fix it and update it and make it more to how he wants. There just isn't as much definition in the characters as there is on the VHS release for it, or the beta release for it as well. So it's just a very, but it's so iconic, and it fits very well onto the cover. Now, obviously, the other thing, and, you know, me talking about logos, obviously that was a mistake, wasn't it? But the the neon logo makes its a second appearance on a Doctor Who VHS. They end up dropping it after this, but it looks pretty good, doesn't it? I think it looks really good. Now, would I be one to say that I like this on a VHS release better than the Diamond logo? I don't think I do. I think it worked well for the two logos, or the two VHSs, Revenge of the Cybermen being the other one. But I just don't think that this is sustainable. And, you know, it looks interesting on the side cover. It's on the back as well. But it looks good, but I don't think that it actually lasts. And, you know, I love the neon logo. I've said that already. But in the US, it was released with the Diamond logo. Now, it also has a black case. It doesn't have the clear cases that all the releases eventually put out there. Now, one of the things that's, you know, to kick the UK fans even further, sorry, UK fans, this is the edited version that aired on PBS. This does not have, I think, what, 2 scenes, 3 scenes, I don't even remember anymore, that wasn't included on the US broadcast, but was, so on November 23rd, 1983 in the US, this version aired, basically, that didn't have a couple scenes, that was saved over for the UK broadcast in 1985. But when it was released, 1983, too many numbers, folks. But when this was released in 1985, they put the wrong version on tape, and you end up with this. So this was, you know, like everything else that was released from Revenge of the Cybermen, then to this, and everything, up until, like, An Earthly Child gets released, everything's edited on BBC Video, including this, which shouldn't have been edited, but it was. So you have that going for it. That's a shame. And by the way, this edited version was, I think, seen on PBS stations really through the end of time, not to be confused with the Doctor Who story called The End of Time. What else about this that is interesting is that there are 2 versions of this release. This, once again, this is BBC 2020, and this says BBC 2020, and then a 2. this does not have any sort of BBFC on it. You notice that, right? It has none of the sort. Now, I had lost my version of the Five Doctors on VHS some time ago. My original version. Because remember, I collected all these. And when I put these back out on the shelf, I realized that one was missing, and that was the Five Doctors. And I knew I had the neon logo version of the early one as well. And I couldn't find it. And I ordered a new one. I found it on eBay, and I ordered myself a new one because I needed to have this complete. The last VHS that I needed, that I had not got in, I would say in 20 some years, was the Tom Baker years. It's like, who cares? But as collectors, this stuff gnaws at us, right? So one day, once again, there's I'm making a video I put out beforehand. I talk about my ex-wife, and I talk about her taking stuff. This behind me, this shelf used to be nothing but Sweet Valley High books. It's kind of a pulp children fiction. She collected all those. These were all here. And one day, since she hadn't lived with me for a long time, I decided to take this back, and I wanted to turn this into an area that had my VHSs on, because they had been in storage for a long time. That's when I was like, I need to complete my PAL journey and get this. And I went on eBay, as one does, and I got this, and it was easy peasy. It wasn't expensive. I had finally all the PAL Doctor Who releases. I was so excited. And I put them up on the shelves. And I can't find the Five Doctors. And I'm like, where's this? Where's the Five Doctors? I mean, I had the 1990 version, but the original 1985 version wasn't there. And so I went out to eBay again, because I love to buy things multiple times because I can't find them in the house. And I got this. Well, actually, I didn't get this. What I ended up getting was this. And it has a BBFC on it. But it's odd, and someone who's much smarter can tell me it's Universal. You can see it's Universal. I got this one first. And I put it on my shelf. Then I started cleaning out parts of the house, and I found a whole area of Five Doctors stuff. That's where I found this that didn't have a rating on it, and right away I noticed that. So there's two, but it's odd because I would have thought that the rating wouldn't have had a BBC 2020 and a number 2 to it. This one does. So to give the impression that this one came out first and then this one. And you can see on the back, there is a difference as well. You see it? I mean, if you don't, then you do need glasses because it's very different on the back. How interesting. And I was going to look it up, but then I realized that life was too short. But the point is that I have both versions of these. I mean, that is commitment, right? I mean, you got to give that to me. That is commitment. So we got that. But one of the things I also found that I knew I had and I couldn't find anywhere was this. The Laserdisc to the Five Doctors. Now, this was only released in the U.S., right? Doctor Who was released, a few titles were released in the UK, but not the Five Doctors. This was released by CBS Fox Video. The back to it as well. Here they use the diamond logo, and on the VHS they use the diamond logo. I believe on this one is where they actually have, and I think this was released in 1991. This has the extra scenes to it. I meant to watch it beforehand because I do need to transfer it to show quality. I know the VHS had the extra scenes in it. I'm pretty sure this has the extra scenes in it. Once again, another kick to the UK fans, because this seems to be complete, and it has a diamond logo. The diamond logo looks good here, okay, folks. It does look really nice, and there's nowhere to put this. Nowhere to put a neon logo on this thing, really. This works out very well. It's a beautiful recreation of Andrew's cover. This is very, very nice. I do love this. It's a nice piece, and I think it's really cool. This was the one of two laser discs that was released by CBS Fox for Doctor Who. The other being Day of the Daleks, and the quality for this was great. I mean, it's Laserdisc quality. I mean, I even have Laserdiscs. One Laserdisc of Are You Being Served? They really bought into the whole Laserdisc thing for CBS Fox. So they also did Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They might have done the early versions of Faulty Towers, and they did Tripods. But as a condensed version of it, they really bought into it. I had dreams of having a whole library of Doctor Who as laser discs. I really wanted. I mean, it's like when this came out, it's like, wouldn't it be great to have them all like that? And having one story per laser disc. Calling Lee from Canada. Now, that's an inside joke. But if you know what I mean by that, you can send me a note, and I'll send you something pretty special. There are people who I know what that means, and they're not meant to win anything. I mean, I actually dreamt one night. I dreamt that I owned The Invasion on Laserdisc. Imagine all these years later owning The Invasion on DVD. I mean, it's not only the same thing, but better. And someday it's going to be on Blu-ray, and it's going to look fantastic. So then we move on to the version from the 1990s. This is an Alistair Pearson version of the cover. This is, once again, as it says right on it, it says the unabridged version. This is the complete version. You wonder after a while, what is the default version, at least in the days when the VHS was out. But this was truly an amazing thing to have. And it says, I think the first time I ever really realized this was a co-production with Australia was, I think it said so on the back of these. And that was the first time I ever even knew that. And it says so. I was thinking if it said so on the Laserdisc, I don't see it, but it certainly says so on this 1990 version of the episode. It's just really so cool, and I love this cover. Once again, taking something and making it different, and it purposely shows Tom is on the outs in the story, and it has a little bit of his title sequence in the background. I always thought that was really a cool touch to it. And then at this point, the first release was the black cover. This release, and I think this is the first time we ran into it, this actually has, there's so few titles available. This actually tells us by showing the covers of what was available at that point. And just as I said, apart from two of them, because you have the original Dalek story, the two parts of the Dalek story listed on here, everything else has been edited. If we're talking about the VHS releases, this version is definitive for me in terms of the Doctor Who, the version of the Five Doctors on VHS, because it's the transmitted version. We've gone through this with Resurrection of the Daleks. This is the stuff that I really am all about here, is getting the transmitted versions of stories. So this takes us to 1995, and we have a very unique piece of BBC video here. And this is the special edition of the Five Doctors. And what makes this really interesting is that, let alone, we'll talk about the Five Doctors itself, this also included the King's Demons. So you get two stories together. For us sad fans who have to have individual tapes for the stories, thank you to them that they gave this to us. Now, I'm not going to make a deal out of the King's Demons yet. We'll make a 5-minute video about it sometime. But the Five Doctors itself, first of all, it came in this really cool box. And it has what you don't see here. It has a postcard album. So with these postcards, and I'm not too worried that I don't have these, but with these postcards, you get them with the other VHSs. Some might have been in DWM. I don't quite remember, but I got most of these secondhand because of the Great Purge and that you weren't able to get them all. So, I'm not too worried that I don't have all the postcards. I think I remember seeing one for Frontier in Space and Warriors of the Deep, but that's about it. If I'm not mistaken, they don't even have, they weren't even clean, that they had the logo and stuff on them as well. So you got that going for it. But, there's somewhere in this house. I don't remember. But as far as this, and I was really interested. First of all, you have the Five Doctors itself. This is a cover by Colin Howard. And this is a very interesting cover. It's another great interpretation of the story. It really is, and what I like about this. It does give precedence to Peter Davison as the Doctor, because it's so easy to kind of. Peter is one of my favorite Doctors, but it is pretty easy to kind of run him over as far as storytelling. I've just been watching Arc of Infinity, and I tell people how much I love it. But the fact is, for the first two parts, he's kind of, in the TARDIS. They didn't really give him a whole lot. Sometimes he's just not as dynamic. But here, and rightly so. And remember, the original Five Doctors, Terrence was going to have Tom Baker go to Gallifrey, not Peter. And even Terrence was like, that's wrong, because Peter is a doctor. Peter should be the hero. But this is a great cover, really nice cover. And looking inside here, we haven't run into one of these yet, which is the inside. The first of when we talk about the later releases that has a little bit of background and stuff. This is one of them, and I'm trying to remember if this is by Andrew Pixley or not. But it's just something a little nice and special to it. This is really pretty cool. Now, as we know, this is the special edition to the Five Doctors. This is taking all of the material, because remember, for the Five Doctors. In the BBC archive, everything that was recorded for the story, film, video, everything exists. Everything exists for the Five Doctors. So you didn't have to start with a transmitted version to create an episodic version. You didn't have to start with a transmitted version to create a special edition. You had all the raw footage and all the different takes and stuff. And so Paul went through that and worked on that. And what was really interesting about this is that this is in Dolby surround sound, which would be the first time that any Doctor Who had been done that way. This was a special release. But as with anything that's special for BBC Video, especially for Doctor Who on BBC Video, this tape is flawed. The sound on the tapes, on all the tapes, duplicated tapes, Dolby was flawed. So it did not actually have the Dolby surround sound. In fact, the sound was kind of clipped. It's like, once again, every time they do something special, the duplication houses constantly are messing it up. And it's really a shame, because these people are putting so much work. Money is being spent to make this good, and mistakes had constantly happened. And that was a shame. It truly was a shame. So we'll talk about where you were able to get the proper Dolby sound here in a second. But it's also worth noting, because I was thinking about this set, and I thought to myself, I got this before I decided to actually start collecting all these. I've talked about getting certain stories and making the decision, and that was like in 1997, 1998 that I decided I'm going to get these all. But I had this already. And I'm like, well, where did I get this from? And then it hit me. I got this at Visions one of the years. It would have been, I don't know if it was in 1995 or 1996, but it was at one of the tables, and it was before it came out over in the U.S. And now I have to look up, and you'll see it on screen when I find it, what cover they used for the U.S. release, because I want to actually say that the cover in the U.S. was actually the Alistair Pearson cover and not the Colin Howard cover. You'll see it on screen which way we go, but this is before it came out over here, and I picked this up and I got it converted. I had friends who converted. We talked about this a billion times. And you could tell the clipped audio, but it was really unique to actually have. And this was the time, they started to get to the time that special editions were kind of a big deal for everything. Star Wars was doing it. This is just a really interesting piece. And that's where I got it from. I got it from Visions. I was trying to remember where I got this from. The memory is so long ago, right? So in 1999, something very amazing happens, and we get the Five Doctors on DVD. And the Five Doctors on DVD is a game changer, isn't it? Now, no offense to Paul or anyone who worked on this, I don't want the special edition. I'm actually not a fan of the special edition. I appreciate it. I appreciate the purpose, the reasoning behind it. I love all of that. And I love the fact that, now we have the transmitted version with being released with everything. But I really am not a fan of the edit. I'm not a fan of the cut. I think that it comes across to me as someone who had access to all the footage, and they made sure that we knew that they had access to all the footage. It doesn't make the story any better, but I bet there are people who have only seen this one to start with, and the transmitted version is not as good to them as this. But this was released in the UK in 1999. It actually comes with a book, and all it really is, it's just going through all of the characters in it. A lot of space just about the characters of the Five Doctors. And it also has a questionnaire from BBC about the how do you become aware of this, how often do you purchase DVDs, let alone this was the first wave of DVDs that the BBC ever put out. The other ones that were put out at this time was the original Blackadder, the best of Monty Python's Flying Circus, Volume 1, Naughty in Toyland, Jane Austen's Persuasion, and then The Planets. Very new format. Now, as me being a fan of PAL, and the US was not releasing DVDs at that point, this was the only one. My first instinct was, how on earth do I get this into my life? I have a PAL TV. I want to watch this in PAL. So, I import the 5 Doctors. Now, I have PAL VCRs. I have PAL TVs. I do not have a PAL DVD player. Now, actually, this is not true. I didn't have a PAL TV at that point. I only had everything I was watching on my tapes. I was converting to run through an NTSC television, and I was converting it, doing color correction on it. A little thing from SEMA for color correction. I had all this stuff, but I couldn't play DVDs. And keep in mind that you couldn't just put in a DVD, because regions was a new thing for us, wasn't it? Region 1, Region 2, Region 3. And so it was like another reason to stop us from watching our stuff. Anyone remember Circuit City? Circuit City started to sell a DVD player called an Apex player. And my friend Robert, who had just freshly moved here, was living in our house. And also, you know who Robert is. Big Doctor Who fan, has done a lot over the years for Doctor Who fandom. He found out about this Apex DVD player. He read online somewhere that it will also play... It will play anything from any country, basically. You just put it in, it will play. And it was $100 to get this DVD player. A lot of money back then. I mean, I don't scoff at $100 even now, but that, when you weren't making any money, that was a lot of money back then. And he went down to Circuit City and he got it, and he was able to show. He showed, because he also got 5 Doctors as well. It played, and it didn't look quite like PAL, because it was being converted and it was bad line conversions. It looked almost filmic, but it played, and immediately, of course, I wanted it. The problem is that Circuit City realized that they were selling, and it wasn't even Circuit City, it was federal regulations, realizing that they were selling something that was not supposed to be able to play different regions. So they took those off the shelf and they replaced it with a version that could not do it with. Now today we live in a society where we use our remotes and we can hack any DVD or Blu-ray player pretty much to play all regions. That was not the case with this Apex player. The Apex player, Robert eventually found that there was a hack for the DVD player. The problem was it was a chip. It was an actual chip. The chip itself was like another $30, something like that. Found it on eBay. And you had to take the chip and you had to add it to... you had to open up the Apex player, and you had to take out one chip and replace it with the other. I didn't want to do that. I was too frightened to. But I asked if Robert would. And Robert was like, he was also like, I don't really want to do it. Could you please do it? You probably have a steadier hand than I do. You understand electronics. So I ordered this chip through eBay. It shows up, and he opens up the machine. Remember I said he has a steadier hand. Not that day. You could see he was really nervous. Once again, folks, $100 when we were, in 1999, I would have been 25, something like that. That was... He was worried. He was so nervous about ruining my Apex player. He was so worried about ruining everything, so he's doing his best to put it in. He puts it in. We put in the 5 Doctors. And it works. And that actually, once I finally did get my PAL TV, and I got a really big one for that time period. I actually had it up until about 2 years ago. Finally threw it out. It was like a Sony Trinitron. It was a Vega, actually. 29-inch. That was big back then. Once you plugged in the PAL and actually had it run in PAL, it was gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. And it was, it wasn't an RCA cable. It was the green, red, blue cables that you plugged in. So the color, a composite, it was just beautiful. It was truly beautiful. And I had that player for years and years and years. I think I might have put it into the moving van when Jolene moved away. Finally picked up her crap last year. I had it that long. It stopped playing some DVDs, but it was really sentimental and really wonderful. And it played this. Now also, you got to keep in mind too, in 2003, we believe, we might have the dates wrong, only by a year or so, BBC the Doctor Who website, released an official cover for the 5 Doctors special edition that matched the rest of the range. And the rest of the range, at that point had the, you know what that looks like. It wasn't that long ago, but they released one that matched. So if you wanted to print it out and replace this cover, you could do so. And you were able to have it on the shelf and didn't stick out like a sore thumb. Us Doctor Who fans need conformity. If we don't have it, we get very upset. And then, of course, the 25th anniversary release of the 5 Doctors is this. 25th. We're looking at the 40th now. What is going on around here with time? We end up with this. This has an O-ring on it that I can't find. I have it somewhere. But when I put them on the shelves, I don't normally have the plastic or the cardboard outer O-ring because I just got done talking about it. I like to see them all looking the same. My version's a little bit different than yours because I'm a firm believer that the 4-part version of the 5 Doctors has been overlooked all of these years. And when the DVD came out with I don't remember if it has the opening credits or not, but it certainly has the end credits for all of them, where the cliffhangers were. I decided I'm going to create my own 4-part version of the 5 Doctors, and I did so. And it's a little bit different. There's some music cues that are not in the 90-minute episode. And so I did it. I recreated the end credits myself so that they're using the new opening titles that were clean, so I could do opening and closing and all these wonderful things to it to make my own 4-part version. And I'm very happy about it. And at that point, now everything is just file-based. But I ended up getting myself a 3-disc case. So then I have created my own disc 3 of the 5 Doctors. You see the bursts there because I was having a hard time figuring out where the bursts came from because I thought it came from Davison's title sequence. But if you put it, I think you put it this way. It's actually the opening to season 18. And so I just kind of created my own version of the 5 Doctors. This is disc 3, and I'm really happy with it.
Now what?
You know, I've never watched it after I made it. I authored the disc and everything. I never watched it. And for those who are like, well, the 4-part version, it was seen once or whatever else, that version is still seen. For one, I can tell you, Pluto TV here in the States that have a Doctor Who channel, whenever they show the 5 Doctors, it's always the 4-part version. Always the 4-part version. And the 4-part version had been on a lot of stations in the U.S., as part of when the stations were showing them episodically opposed to movie versions. It always show up that way. I've had people, I think I got a recording from Nebraska at one point of the 5 Doctors episodic. It certainly was there. And I was just asked today if I'm going to make a Blu-ray version of it. I don't know. Life's too short, isn't it? Speaking of Blu-ray, they include every version of everything on here, but not the episodic, 4-part episodic, which actually did air. Whatever. It's okay. I think there's 3 versions of the 5 Doctors on here. Can I be honest? This will probably go over as well as my talk in the War Machines video about the Diamond logo. But this is great, but I thought that the 5 Doctors should not be on season 20. It should not be on season 21. To me, it's always very separate, and I know people have explained to me in great detail why I'm wrong, but what's really interesting here is that this is a special story, and you could have infinite versions. I mean, why stop? I mean, we have multiple versions of everything. Just add more to it, right? Do a steelbook just of the 5 Doctors. And I've seen other people tote this too. I mean, I think I came up with this idea, but I've seen others also have it, so it's clearly a collective idea. Do a steelbook of the 5 Doctors and have your transmitted version, have different special editions, have your 4-part version, have just a disc of studio footage and also film rushes and stuff like that, your documentaries. Have it all in one release, one Blu-ray release, and have it separate from the sets. Obviously, that's not going to happen, right? Because if it was, it wouldn't have been on here. I am grateful for it, and I'm grateful it's on season 20, not season 21. Yeah, but that would have been weird, wouldn't it? There is absolutely no reason for that. But that was my thought with the 5 Doctors on Blu-ray. So we've been talking a lot about these versions. Like I said, for the sake of comparison and everything else, for me, the transmitted 1990 version of the 5 Doctors to me is the definitive version, and for VHS. Let's just be clear. So I'm gonna do it. We're gonna do, as usual, one of these comparisons. I'm gonna do 2 comparisons. The first is going to be from studio footage. We're going to have on here, we're going to have not the original release because it's not the transmitted version. We're going to have this version out there. We're also going to have the 25th anniversary DVD and then the new Blu-ray. We're going to do something from in studio, but I also want to do something from the film because I think that the film for the collection set really is a great grade for that story, and finally seems to be more in line with the overall story. It looks great, but you be the judge. Take a look.
Finished?
Yes. Looks rather splendid, doesn't it?
But will the TARDIS work properly?
Of course, once everything's run in.
Didn't you repair anything?
Well, the TARDIS is more than a machine, Tegan. It's like a person. It needs coaxing, persuading, and encouraging.
You mean it's just as unreliable?
You have little faith, Tegan.
Be reasonable, Doctor. I am. I listened. As you see, I'm armed. I could easily kill you if I wanted to.
And not humiliate me first. Oh, that isn't your style at all.
I also have a recall device that'll take me back to the conference room in the heart of the capital.
So you say. I would prefer more positive proof of your credentials.
One of your other selves took it from me.
Do you expect me to believe the fantastic tale you've just told?
It's great to have all these versions, and it's great to see what has been improved on over the years. But it's amazing. It's 5 Doctors. It's one of the stories I think I have most. Once again, not even counting just the pre-records and the official versions, all my other recordings and stuff of it. A bit overwhelming, I'm sure. Also, folks, I do a Patreon. I haven't done one of these videos in a while, so I did lose some people, and rightly so. I mean, you don't get people if you don't have content, but content's coming up. We recorded a lot of stuff, and we have some stuff going. It takes a lot, and I have a behind-the-scenes video of just putting one of these on, so you can kind of see what goes into it, all the research and stuff that happens with it. If you consider doing so, please do so. Support these. At the end of the day, all I want is people to enjoy them. So if you don't feel like that it's worthwhile to put money towards it, but you still enjoy it, I'm happy about that. If you want to put a little in, I would be even more happy about that. But that's not the sole reason why I do it. And then, as usual, surprisingly, I didn't say this up front. If I got anything wrong, and there's a lot to get wrong in today's episode, but if I got any of it wrong, send me a polite note. You can send me a note and let me know. You can put it in the comments on the YouTube page. There's always something to chat about. I love hearing what everyone has to say. There's stories about getting these videos and stuff. This is really what makes it so exciting, that you all share the same passion as I do. And I am about to record the video for An Unearthly Child, because after all, that's how it all started.
And there are more space adventures on these BBC videos.